Welcome to Hushyrest, a quiet space for gentle stories and calm mysteries, created for rest, sleep, and late night listening. This story takes place in a small town during the month of February. Only the elderly remember something that happened there, something that was never written down and never fully explained. The younger generations don't remember it at all and don't feel that anything is missing. What happened wasn't a tragedy, but it wasn't insignificant either. This is a story about memory, quiet inheritance, and the way certain moments fades across generations. February settles over the town without announcement. There are no signs, no ceremonies, no visible shift, just a subtle change in how the day seems to rest on the streets. Winter had already been there for months, but February feels different, quieter, as if the town has stopped expecting anything new. The streets are mostly empty in the mornings, not abandoned, just unhurried. Snow lines the sidewalks in uneven layers, shaped by days of wind rather than footsteps. The same cars are parked in the same places. The same lights turn on in the same windows before sunrise. Nothing appears unusual, and yet the repetition feels deliberate, almost careful. People follow their routines without comment. The bakery opens at the same hour. The post office door sticks the same way it always has. Someone clears the snow from the steps of the town hall, even when no one is expected to come inside. These things happen every winter, but in February they feel less like habits and more like quiet agreements. There is no sense of urgency here, no anticipation of spring. January has already exhausted the idea of endurance. In March, it still feels too far away to imagine. February exists in between, suspended. The days are short, but no one seems to be counting them. The town doesn't feel lonely, it feels paused. In the afternoons, smoke rises slowly from chimneys, lingering longer than it should. The river at the edge of the town moves under a thin layer of ice, making sounds that blend into the background, noticed but not remarked upon. Dogs are walked along familiar routes, always turn back before dusk. Children still go to school, still laugh, still run, but they come home earlier this month, as if following an unspoken rule. No one has ever said that February is different here. There are no warnings, no stories told openly, and yet, when someone mentions the month aloud, the word carries a weight it doesn't seem to have elsewhere. Not fear, not sadness, just reconnection. The town has been standing in this place for generations, buildings repaired rather than replaced, roads that carve the way they always have. And remember winters the way all places do, not as events, but as layers. February is one of those layers, thin, quiet, persistent. At night, the street lights glow softly against the snow, casting shadows that don't move much. Windows stay lit longer than necessary. Radios play low, steady voices. Nothing interrupts the calm. Nothing demands attention. If something were wrong, it could be obvious. But there is no tension here, no sense of something approaching. Only a feeling that the town is waiting, not for something to happen, but for something to finish. February passes through the streets, the way a breath passes through a room. It doesn't disturb anything. It doesn't rearrange what's already there. It simply stays. The older residents of the town begin to gather more often in February. Not in any formal way, not all at once. It happens gradually, almost without being noticed. They sit together in warm kitchens, in the back room of the library, or near the windows of a small cafe on Main Street. They choose the same tables each time. No one suggests it. It simply happens. Their conversations are quiet, not secretive, just soft. Voices kept low out of a habit rather than caution. They speak slowly, as if there's no reason to rush the words. Often they begin with ordinary things: the weather, the condition of the roads, who has been unwell, who has moved closer to family. The names repeat, familiar and expected. But beneath these small exchanges, something else lingers. A past that stretches a little longer than necessary. A sentence that begins and then stops. A look exchanged when a certain detail is mentioned. I notice that February comes up often. Not directly, not at first. It appears quietly, folded into conversation. Someone will mention how cold it was that one winter. Another will nod and say, yes, February was different then. No year is attached to the memory. No explanation follows. When someone tries to continue, the words trail off. Not because there are interrupts, but because the sentence no longer seems necessary. The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. The silence that follows is not uncomfortable. It is accepted. They do not contradict one another. If two memories don't align, no one points it out. There is no effort to correct or clarify. Each recollection is allowed to stand out on its own. At times, someone will laugh softly, not at a joke, but at the shape of a thought, as if recognizing something familiar without needing to name it. I began to notice how carefully they avoid certain words. They never say event, never say accident, never say that night. Instead, they speak around the memory, letting it remain undefined. When the conversation drifts too close, someone changes the subject, not abruptly, gently. A comment about the coffee, a question about the snow. The shift is smooth enough that it barely registers. What strikes me the most is the absence of emotion. There is no fear in their voices, no anger, no grief that hasn't already settled in something quieter. Whatever they remember, it no longer hurts. And yet, it hasn't faded either. February holds their attention in a way no other month does. When it is mentioned, the room seems to still, not because something is about to be revealed, but because everyone already knows what cannot be fully said. They sit together for long stretches without speaking. Tea grows cold. Light shifts across the room. No one checks the time. It becomes clear to me that these gatherings are not about remembered details. They are about acknowledging something shared, something that belongs only to those who were already here. When February felt different. When memories began to surface, they do not arrive all at once. They appear slowly, one at a time, carried by different voices. Each memory stands apart, separate from the others, like pieces that were never meant to fit together. One of the elders remembers a night that lasted longer than it should have. Not darker, just longer. He says the clock kept moving, but the night refused to end. Morning arrived late, hesitant, as if uncertain. He cannot say how he knows this, only that everyone noticed. Another remembered the same night differently. For her, it was no length of it, but its stillness. She described a quiet so complete, it seemed to press against the walls. Even when usual sounds, the river, the wind, the distant hum of wires, all of it faded in something thinner, almost absent. Then there is the sound. Several of them mention it, though no one describes it the same way. One calls it a low vibration. Another says it was closer to a tone, steady and unfamiliar. Someone else insists it wasn't loud at all, just noticeable enough to make the silence feel different. They struggle with the language. Words circle the memory without landing on it. They pause often, searching for something precise that never quite appears. Eventually, they stop trying. One woman remembers waking early the next morning. She says the town looked unchanged. Snow where it had always been. Doors where they belong. But something was missing. She cannot say what. Only that it was obvious at the time. Another elder remembers an absence too, but not the same one. For him, it was a person who didn't appear. Not missing, exactly, just not there. Not alarm was raised. No search began. The day continued as it always had. Someone else recalls an object out of place, something small, a detail that shouldn't have mattered, and yet it stayed with them. As these memories unfold, no one interrupts, no one corrects a detail. When two recollections contradict each other, the contradiction is allowed to exist. There is no attempt to reconcile them. The elders listen carefully, nodding now and then, not in agreement, but in reconnection. Each memory seems to awaken another, though not necessarily a related one. They do not ask follow-up questions. They do not press for clarifying. It becomes clear that precision is not the goal. What matters is the shared sense that something did occur, something that touched everyone differently, something that did not leave behind a single story, but many incomplete ones. The night, the sound, the absence, they overlap without aligning, like reflections in an even glass. At one point, someone suggests that perhaps they are remember different things. The thought is met with quiet acceptance. No one asks, no one insists otherwise. February is mentioned again. Always February, never another month, never another season. They speak of it as it were a container, a boundary. Whatever happened, it belongs there. As the memory went down, the room grows quiet again. Not because there is nothing left to say, but because everything important has already been approached as closely as it can be. The fragments remain scattered. No clear timeline, no single version, only overlaps, only echoes. And yet, listening to them, it becomes impossible to believe that nothing happened at all. Too many memories touch the same edges. Too many pauses fall in the same places. There is no consensus among them, no shared conclusion, just a careful understanding that whatever Ferrari brought that year, it did not leave behind answers, only the memory of having noticed. As the memory settles back into silence, something else becomes clear. It is not only what they remember that remains incomplete, it is the way they speak about it. There is no word they agree on, no label that even seems to fit. They do not call it an accident. They do not call it an event. They do not call it a tragedy. Those words are never spoken, not once. When someone comes close to using one, the sentence shifts. A pause appears. The shape of the thought changes. The word is left behind. It does not feel like avoidance born of fear. No one tenses. No one grows uncomfortable. Instead, it feels practiced, as if the decision was made long ago and quietly upheld ever since. They speak around the memory, not into it. They describe the air, the sounds, the feeling of the morning after. They describe what followed, routines resuming, days continuing, but never the thing itself. The absence of a name becomes its own presence, a space in the conversation that everyone recognizes. At what point I tried to listen for frustration, for a moment when someone might say, "I don't know what to call it," but that moment never comes. They do not search for a word, because they are not missing one. It is a thought named it would be a distortion, a way of forcing shape onto something that never had clear edges. When I ask, gently, why it was never written down, the question is met with the same calm silence, not refusal, not discomfort, just stillness. Someone eventually answers, don't know directly. They say that at the time, it didn't feel like something that could be recorded. It wasn't over quickly enough, and it didn't last long enough to become something else. Another adds that no one thought to mark it. There was no date written in margins. No one notes in calendars. Nothing that said, this is important. And yet, everyone knew. The silence surrounding it felt intentional, not imposed, chosen, maintained not by rules, but by mutual understanding. In that silence, the memory remains flexible and fixed. It does not harden into a single version. It does not become something that must be defended or explained. I realized then that the lack of a name is what has allowed the memory to survive. Had it been called something, anything, it might have settled too firmly. It might have been simplified, dismissed, explained away. Instead, it remains open, unfinished. The elders seem aware of this, though no one of them say it outright. They do not treat the silence as loss. They treat as a preservation. As the conversation fades, the space where the word should be remains untouched. No one rushes to fill it. No one seems inclined to try. Whatever happened in February does not belong to language. It resists shape. It resists conclusion. And in refusing to name it, the town has allowed it to remain exactly what it was. Something that occurred and was noticed and then left without explanation. The younger people in town moved through February without noticing it. They walk the same streets with headphones in, eyes down, hands busy. For them, the month is just another stretch of cold days, another page to turn, nothing that lingers. They do not know the stories because no one ever told them, not in whispers, not in warnings, not even by accident. There was no moment when an adult sat down, cleared their throat, and said, "This is something you should know." The memory simply stopped, somewhere between one generation and the next. When asked about the past, they answer with practical things: snowstorms, closed schools, a winter festival that no longer exists. Their February is measured in schedule and screens, not in pauses, not in absences. They don't sense the hesitation that older residents carry, like a weight they never set down. It isn't that the young are uninterested. Curiosity just never found a place to attach itself. There is no missing chapter for them, because the book was printed without it. They don't feel that something was skipped, because nothing ever interrupts their telling of time. In a conversations between generations, the gap is subtle but firm. The elders speak carefully, cycling certain dates, choosing words that lead nowhere. The young listened politely, then drift away, their attention already elsewhere. What isn't named cannot be asked about. Sometimes another voice begins a sentence, then stops, then pause stretches, becomes uncomfortable, and is quietly filled by someone younger changing the subject. No one insists, no one presses. The silence is allowed to close again, smooth and unbroken. The town itself reflects this divide. All buildings remain, but their stories do not. Plaques mention years and renovations, never interruptions. What happened? Whatever check it had, left no official trace for the young to stumble upon. February continues to arrive each year, unchanged in appearance. The younger generation experiences it as repetition, not as remembrance. They feel no tension in the air, no feeling of time, no sense that something once left here. For them, winter is only weather, and yet they inherit the effects without cause. Routines subtle shaped by decisions made long ago, but chosen habits formed without explanation. They live inside consequences without ever learning their origin. The memory was not erased, it was simply not passed on, not through cruelty, not through neglect, but through quiet exhaustion. At some point, the telling required more effort than the silence, and so silence won. Now, February belongs differently to each age. To the elders, it is a presence. To the young, it is an empty time. The same month held two ways, never quite touching. Where it remains is a clean break, not breach of questions, not shared language, only the steady movement forward, carrying a gap so old it no longer feels like one. There are habits in the town that no one remembers learning. They exist without origin, practice without thought, like breathing in cold air. People follow them automatically, never asking why, never noticing where they began. In February, one street remains unusually empty after dark. It is not blocked, not marked, not officially closed. Lights still work, snow is still cleared, and yet footsteps slow near its entrance, then turned away. No sign explains it, no rule enforces it. The avoidance passes quietly from one person to the next without words. Those who live nearby lock their doors earlier that month, not out of fear, but habit. They say it helps with the cold, with the wind, with nothing in particular. Their explanation trail off before reaching anything solid. The behavior remains, the reason does not. There is also a building near the center of town, intact and remarkable. Its windows are clean, its roof repaired, its door firmly shut. No business has occupied it for years, not because it failed, not because it burned, simply because it was never reopened. People refer to it vaguely, as if its name slipped away. When someone suggests using the space, turning it something new, the idea fades quickly, not rejected, just abandoned. Conversation drift, excuses surface, permits, timing, funding. The building stays closed, patient, untouched by intention. Then there is the date, a square on the calendar, unmarked, no holiday, no memorial, no official recognition. And yet, plans are rarely made for that day. Even shift slightly, meetings reschedule themselves without comment. If noticed at all, it is dismissed as a coincidence, a practical adjustment, nothing more. No one points to the pattern, even when it repeats. The date passes each year, quietly, carrying its weight alone. These are the traces that remain, not stories, not warnings, but distortions in behavior, small bends in routine that suggest something once pressed against them, like footprints after snowfall, softened by time, still faintly visible. The town does not acknowledge these marks. They are too subtle for concern, too ordinary for alarm. They live in the background, shaping movement, shaping choice, without drawing attention. Even when newcomers adapt quickly, they learn where not to walk, where not to linger, when not to ask. No one instructs them. They simply follow the flow, the way the water learns the shape of a riverbed. February reveals these patterns most clearly, not because anything happens, but because nothing does. The stillness makes absence noticeable. The gap stands out, framed by quiet days and early nights. What once caused the habits remains unnamed. The town does not search for it. It does not feel lost, only distant, like a word on the tip of the tongue that no longer matters enough to recover. They are not scarce, not quiet. They do not urge. They do not warn. They simply persist. footprints without history, movement without memory, choices without explanation. And as long as they remained unexplained, they continued to work, guiding feet, closing doors, leaving certain spaces untouched, proof that something passed through here once. And though it left no story behind, it never fully left at all. At some point, the narrator begins to ask questions, not urgent ones, not demanding answers, just gentle curiosity. Why there are no records, no newspaper articles, no photograph, no visual mentioned. The questions are asked carefully, almost apologetically. They are met with calm expressions, slight nods, quiet patience. No one seems offended. No one seems surprised. The answers arrive slowly and never all at once. Some say the town didn't think it was important at the time. Others mention lost files, old systems, offices that closed. A few smile faintly, as if the explanation is obvious, even if the words are not. There is no frustration in their voices, no sense of injustice, no desire to correct the absence. The missing records do not feel like a mistake. They feel intentional, though no one claims responsibility. One elderly woman explains that not everything was meant to be written down. Her voice is soft, steady, and concerned. She says some things belong only to who were there. Then she pauses, as if checking that thought against memory, and lets it go. Another person suggests that the town tried to remember, at first, that there were conversations, quiet acknowledgments, brief attempts to explain, but over time those efforts became tiring. The explanations grew thinner, the words less useful. Eventually, it was easier to stop trying. The narrator asks whether anyone regrets that choice. The question hangs briefly, suspended in the air. Then it settles, answered, not because it is ignored, but because it does not seem necessary. No one expresses loss. No one speaks of forgetting as a failure. There is a shared understanding, unspoken, that the event did not disappear. It simply changed its place. Someone mentions that the memory stopped belonging to the town. Not all at once, not dramatically. It drifted from conversation, from record, from explanation. until it no longer requires maintenance. Without repetition, memory loosened its hold. Without naming, it lost its edges. What remained was not a story, but a residue. The narrator realized that forgetting his did not mean absence. It meant release. The event was not erased. It was set down. It stopped asking to be carried. This understanding arrived quietly, not as a conclusion, but as a dawn. A sense that the town made peace with something long before it learned how to describe it. Ferrari still arrive each year. The habits persist. The silence remains intact. But the need to explain, to document, to preserve has faded. Not because it failed, but because it finished. The narrator senses that pressing further would not uncover more. There is nothing hidden behind the calm, no secret waiting to be revealed. Only a shared acceptance that some experiences do not vanish, they simply stop belonging to anyone at all. As winter begins to loosen its grips, the town changes almost imperceptibly. The snow thins, retreating into narrow shadows along the streets. Daylight stretches a little further into the afternoon, without ceremony. Nothing marks the shift, except the feeling that something heavy has left slightly. Ferrari moved toward its end, quietly, as it always does. No announcement follows it, no reflection, no acknowledgement. The town simply continues. Some of the elderly no longer gather. Their chairs remain empty, their names spoken less often. Time takes them one by one without urgency. Their passing does not disturb the balance. It only reduces the number of voices capable of remembering, even imperfectly. With them, the fragments grow thinner. The half sentences, the pauses, the careful silences. What was once shared in pieces become harder to locate, not because it is hidden, but because there are fewer places left for it to surface. The event itself does not return. It does not clarify, does not sharpen. It fades, not into darkness, but into neutrality, like a sound heard too long ago to describe, yet still faintly present. No conclusion forms, nothing aligns into certainty. There is no final understanding, no moment of realization, only continuity. Spring approaches, tentative and remarkable. Windows opened, routines adjust, life resumes its ordinary pace. The habits remain, though the origin grows even more distant. The narrator lives with not answers, only impressions, tones, absences. The sense that nothing once mattered here, deeply, briefly, and then stop asking to be remembered. Nothing is resolved, nothing is confirmed. The town does not need it to be. February will return next year. The street will still empty itself at night. The building will remain closed. The date will pass quietly again, and the memory, now belonging to no one, will continue to be not lost, not preserved, simply dispersed. What remains is not a mystery, it's the usual sense. There is no question demanding an answer, only a quiet shape. Where something once was, the night settles gently over the town, and in that stillness, nothing insists on being known.